Something happened at that Cleveland Browns practice, and it wasn't supposed to be seen this way. At first, it looked like a normal off-season battle. Two quarterbacks, same field, same opportunity, both trying to prove they deserve the job. That's what fans expect this time of year: competition, energy, maybe even a little tension. But what went down that day? It didn't feel like competition anymore. It felt personal. It felt like a line had been crossed, and more importantly, it felt like the team noticed. Because the reaction afterward, that's what raised eyebrows. Coaches weren't just evaluating throws. Teammates weren't just watching reps. There was a shift, subtle but real. The kind of shift that tells you something deeper is unfolding behind closed doors. And when moments like that happen inside an NFL locker room, they don't just disappear. They stick. They influence decisions. They change trajectories. And here, where things get even more interesting. While everyone's been busy debating who should start, who looks sharper, who fits the system better, the Browns might have already started making their decision. Not publicly, not officially, but quietly behind the scenes, pieces are already moving. Because one name that used to be part of this conversation has almost completely vanished. Dillon Gabriel. Just a short time ago, this was a quarterback the organization invested real draft capital in. A player fans were excited about. A name that analysts kept bringing up as a potential future piece. And now, it's like he's been erased from the storyline entirely. No real mentions, no real updates, just silence. And in the NFL, silence like that usually means one thing: something is coming. Now pair that with what insiders have started hinting at carefully, but clearly. Conversations about bringing in another young quarterback. Talk about reshaping the room. Even subtle suggestions that not everyone currently on the roster is guaranteed a spot when things get serious. That's not random. That's calculated. And when you connect all the dots, one reality starts to take shape. This isn't just a quarterback competition anymore. This is a transition. If you love real talk and fearless NFL breakdowns, hit subscribe and join Coach Speaks. A shift in direction. And right in the middle of it all is a name that keeps getting harder to ignore, not because the media is pushing it, but because the situation itself keeps pointing back to him. ShedeurSanders. While the spotlight has been split, while the narratives have been cautious, he's been doing one thing consistently: climbing, quietly taking ground, putting himself in a position where the team can't ignore what's happening anymore. So now the real question isn't just who wins the job. It's this: has the decision already started being made, and we're just watching it unfold in real time? That practice started like any other: scripted reps, controlled tempo, coaches watching every detail. Nothing unusual on the surface. But if you were really paying attention, you could feel it almost immediately. Something was off. The energy wasn't just competitive, it was tense. Every throw felt like it meant more. Every rep looked like it carried weight beyond just getting better. This wasn't two quarterbacks casually battling it out in the offseason. This felt like two players trying to take control of something that wasn't being handed to either of them. And then it happened. One sequence, one moment that instantly changed the tone of the entire field. It wasn't just a bad throw or a missed read. It was the reaction that followed, the body language, the way teammates looked at each other, the way coaches stepped in quicker than usual. That's the kind of stuff you can't fake, and you definitely can't hide, even in a controlled practice environment. Because in the NFL, moments like that tell a bigger story. You could see it in how the reps were handled afterward. Rotations got tighter. Conversations got quieter. Coaches weren't just observing anymore, they were evaluating with urgency. It was like something had been confirmed in real time. And here's the part most people missed. It wasn't about who won that moment. It was about what that moment revealed. One quarterback looked like he was pressing, trying to force control, trying to prove something instantly. The other looked composed, steady, like he understood the situation without needing to overreact. And when you're dealing with a position as sensitive as quarterback, that difference matters more than any stat line. Because coaches aren't just watching talent. They're watching how you handle pressure when things don't go your way. And in that instant, the entire evaluation shifted. You could almost feel the sideline recalibrating. Teammates respond differently when they sense instability. Coaches adjust faster when they see patterns forming. And front offices, they pay attention to moments like this way more than they let on publicly. This is where competitions quietly turn into decisions. Not in press conferences, not in highlight clips, but in these small, intense flashes where the truth shows up whether a player is ready for it or not. And the craziest part, nothing official came out of it. No statements, no headlines, no dramatic announcements. Just silence. But not the normal kind of silence, the kind that feels intentional. The kind that tells you something has been noted, filed away, and will absolutely be used when it's time to make a move. Because from that point on, the conversation didn't feel as open anymore. It didn't feel like a wide-open race. It felt like the team had started leaning, even if they weren't ready to say it out loud yet. And once that shift begins inside an organization, it doesn't go backward. It only moves in one direction. Which is exactly why what happened next, away from the field, in interviews and insider reports, suddenly started making a whole lot more sense. Not long ago, Dillon Gabriel was a name you couldn't avoid if you followed the Browns. Every discussion about the future included him. Analysts kept bringing up his upside. Fans were debating how soon he could realistically see the field. And the organization itself, they didn't spend a third-round pick on him by accident. That's not a casual move, that's a statement. That's a team saying, "We see something here." There was real belief behind that selection. And for a while it showed. Mentions in press conferences, segments on podcasts, breakdowns from insiders trying to project his role. Even when he wasn't front and center, he was always part of the conversation, always somewhere in the mix. But then something changed. And it didn't happen loudly. It wasn't a headline. It wasn't a breaking news alert. It was quieter than that, almost too quiet. His name just started disappearing. No updates, no real analysis. No one asking the obvious questions about where he fits now. It's like the entire media cycle around him just froze. And in a market like Cleveland, where every quarterback storyline gets picked apart daily, that kind of silence doesn't happen by accident. It feels controlled. Because think about it, when a young quarterback struggles, people talk about it. When he shows promise, people talk about it. When there's uncertainty, people definitely talk about it. But when nobody is saying anything at all, that usually means something is being worked on behind the scenes. And the timing makes it even more interesting. This shift didn't happen in a vacuum. It lined up perfectly with changes inside the organization. New voices stepping in, new ideas being implemented, a different vision starting to take shape. And when that happens in the NFL, players tied to the old plan, they don't always survive the transition. That's the part people don't like to say out loud. Because it's not always about talent. It's not even always about performance. Sometimes it's simply about fit, about whether a player aligns with what the new leadership wants to build moving forward. And right now, it's starting to look like Dillon Gabriel might not fit that picture anymore. You can feel it in how conversations have shifted. Notice how when people talk about the Browns' quarterback situation now, his name barely comes up, if at all. The focus has moved elsewhere. The energy has moved elsewhere. And in the NFL, attention is everything. If the spotlight moves away from you, it usually doesn't come back. At least not in the same way. What makes this even more telling is that nobody has stepped in to correct the narrative. No strong endorsements. No clear statements about his role. Just vague answers and general comments about competition and evaluation. And when answers get that vague, it usually means the real plan isn't ready to be revealed yet. But it's there. Because teams don't just forget about a third-round quarterback overnight. They make decisions, they reassess, they pivot. And when they go quiet like this, it's often right before something changes. Which is exactly why, when an insider finally spoke up and addressed the situation directly, it hit a lot harder than people expected. Up to this point, everything around Dillon Gabriel felt like reading between the lines. The silence, the missing mentions, the way the conversation kept moving without him. You could sense something was off, but there was still room for doubt. Maybe it was temporary. Maybe the team was just keeping things quiet. Maybe there was a plan nobody fully understood yet. And then, someone inside the circle finally said it out loud. Not in a dramatic, headline-chasing way. Not with bold accusations or over-the-top claims. Just a calm, direct answer to a simple question, and that's what made it hit different. When a trusted insider was asked whether Gabriel even factors into the Browns' plans moving forward, the response wasn't a strong yes. It wasn't even a confident maybe. It was conditional. If the Browns bring in another young quarterback, they would be open to moving him. Read that again. A second-year quarterback, a recent third-round investment, and the organization is already willing to consider moving on, not because of a public failure, not because of a major incident, but because they might find someone else they prefer. That tells you everything. Now, to be clear, this isn't being framed as a done deal. Nobody is saying a trade is guaranteed, and insiders were careful with their wording. Phrases like, they would be open to it matter. That's how these conversations are usually presented when decisions are still developing. But make no mistake, that kind of language doesn't come out unless the door is already open. Wide open. Because NFL teams don't casually float the idea of moving a young quarterback unless they've already started preparing for that possibility behind the scenes. These are calculated organizations. Every word that reaches the public has usually been filtered, measured, and timed. So when something like this slips through, it's not random. It's a signal. And what makes this even more telling is the timing of it all. This isn't happening after years of evaluation. This is happening early, before Gabriel has even had a real chance to establish himself on the biggest stage, which means the decision isn't purely based on what he's done. It's based on where the team is going. That's the shift. Because when a franchise starts talking about bringing in another developmental quarterback while already having one in place, it's not about depth. It's about replacement. It's about finding someone who better fits the new vision, the new system, the new direction. And in that scenario, Gabriel doesn't just become expendable. He becomes the odd man out. But here, where the story really flips. Because if the Browns are willing to move Gabriel this quickly, it raises a much bigger question, one that goes beyond him entirely. Who are they making room for? If you love real talk and fearless NFL breakdowns, hit subscribe and join Coach Speaks. Because teams don't clear space at quarterback unless they already believe in someone else stepping into that role. And once you start looking at the roster through that lens, one name keeps standing out more than any other. A name that hasn't been getting the loudest headlines, but keeps showing up in all the right moments. And when you connect that to what we've already seen on the field, it starts to feel less like a coincidence and more like a plan that's already in motion. While all the attention has been split between headlines, rumors, and speculation, one thing has been happening right in front of everyone, almost unnoticed. ShedeurSanders has been taking control of this situation. Not loudly, not with over-the-top hype, but step by step, moment by moment, he's been positioning himself in a way that's getting harder to ignore. And the craziest part, he didn't start anywhere near the top. At one point, he was buried on the depth chart, fourth in line, an afterthought in most conversations. The kind of player people mention quickly before moving on to the real competition. No guarantees, no special treatment, just another name trying to find a way to stick. But that didn't last. Because when his opportunity came, he didn't hesitate. He didn't look overwhelmed. He didn't play safe. He stepped in and delivered the kind of performances that force coaches to take a second look. And before anyone really processed what was happening, he had climbed past the noise, past the assumptions, and into a position nobody expected him to reach that quickly. He earned starts. Not one, not two. 7 straight. And in the NFL, that doesn't happen by accident. Coaches don't hand out that kind of trust unless they're seeing something real behind the scenes, in practice, in meetings, in preparation. It's about consistency. It's about decision-making. It's about showing that you can handle the pressure when the lights are on. That's what separated him. And now, fast forward to this offseason, and look at the situation again. New coaching direction, new offensive system, everyone resetting back to zero. On paper, that might seem like it favors the veteran, someone with experience, someone who been there before. But here's the part people overlook. Experience only matters if it translates to the system you're running. And right now, nobody has that advantage. This is a brand new offense, new terminology, new reads, new expectations, which means the playing field is as level as it's ever going to be. No shortcuts, no muscle memory to rely on, just execution. And when everything comes down to execution, the edge goes to the player who's already proven he can adapt quickly under pressure. That's Shedeur. You can see it in how the conversation has slowly started shifting. He's no longer being framed as just a developmental piece or a long-term project. He's right in the middle of the starting conversation, going head-to-head with a veteran who, on paper, should have the clear advantage. But it doesn't feel that way anymore. Because when a young quarterback shows he can rise from the bottom, handle real game reps, and keep improving without getting rattled, teams start looking at him differently. Coaches start trusting him differently. And organizations start planning differently. That's the shift happening right now. This isn't just about potential anymore. This is about presence. This is about a player who has already shown he can take control when given the chance. And now, he's stepping into an environment where that chance is bigger than ever. And if he continues on this trajectory, this won't stay a quiet takeover for long. Because once the competition officially heats up, and the reps start mattering even more, the gap between perception and reality is going to close fast. And when that happens, the conversation around this quarterback room is going to get a lot more uncomfortable for certain people involved. And this is where the situation stops being a feel-good competition and starts getting uncomfortable. Because as much as people want to focus on development, potential, and letting the best man win, there's a reality sitting in the middle of this quarterback room that nobody really wants to address directly. Deshaun Watson. On paper, this shouldn't even be a debate. You're talking about a quarterback with multiple Pro Bowl selections, years of starting experience, and a resume that, at one point, put him among the top players at the position. That kind of profile usually locks in your role. It gives you time, patience, and every opportunity to succeed. But right now, it doesn't feel that secure. Because the version of Watson the Browns committed to isn't the version they've consistently seen on the field. The flashes have been there, sure. Moments where you can see the talent that made him elite. But they've been exactly that moments, not sustained control, not week-to-week dominance. And in a league that moves as fast as the NFL, inconsistency creates pressure. Pressure from coaches, pressure from the locker room, pressure from the front office that built everything around you. And now, for the first time since he arrived, there's a real variable in play. A younger quarterback who isn't just developing, but pushing. That's where things shift. Because it's one thing to have a backup waiting in the wings. It's another thing entirely to have someone actively making a case that they might give the team a better chance to win right now. That's not a future conversation anymore. That's a present one. And teams don't ignore that. But here, where it gets complicated, and why this situation has the potential to turn into something much bigger than just a depth chart decision. Watson isn't just any veteran quarterback. He's a major investment. Financially, structurally, publicly. Everything about his presence on this roster is tied to decisions the organization has already made and committed to. And when you've invested at that level, moving in a different direction isn't just about football. It's about optics. It's about timing. It's about how that decision impacts the entire organization from top to bottom. So even if, and this is where things get interesting, even if Shedeur clearly outperforms him in camp, in practice, in every measurable way, what happens then? Do you make the switch? Do you stick with the investment? Do you risk the locker room, noticing the gap between performance and decision-making? Because players see everything. They know who's executing and who isn't. And once that becomes obvious, it can shift how a team responds, how they rally, and who they believe in when things get tough. That's the part nobody is saying out loud yet. But it's there, looming over this entire competition. Because this isn't just about who wins the starting job. It's about whether the Browns are willing to follow through on what the competition reveals, or if other factors step in and complicate that outcome. And if that tension starts to build, it won't stay contained. It'll show up in press conferences, in play-calling decisions, in how reps are distributed, in how quickly the narrative around the team starts to shift. Which is exactly why everything the Browns have been doing this offseason suddenly feels a lot more intentional. And when you step back and look at everything the Browns have done this offseason, a pattern starts to emerge. Not a loud, headline-grabbing overhaul, not a dramatic rebuild, but a series of very specific moves that all point in the same direction, a quiet reset. Because teams don't just make random adjustments in free agency. Every signing, every target, every position they prioritize tells you how they see their future unfolding. And right now, Cleveland's moves don't look like a team trying to patch holes for a short-term push. They look like a team building something new. Start with the offensive line. Instead of chasing flashy names or one-dimensional players, they've been focused on versatility. Guys who can move across positions. Players who can adapt depending on who's under center. That kind of flexibility isn't just about depth, it's about preparing for change. It's about making sure the system can function smoothly no matter how the quarterback situation plays out. That's not accidental. That's strategic. Because when you're confident in your long-term quarterback, you usually build specifically around his strengths. But when you're still evaluating, you build in a way that keeps your options open while still creating a stable environment for whoever steps in. And that's exactly what this looks like. Then look at how they're approaching the skill positions. Instead of throwing massive money at established veteran receivers, the focus has shifted toward the draft. Younger players, fresh talent, guys who can grow within the system rather than arriving with expectations already attached. That approach changes the dynamic of the offense completely. Because young receivers don't come in demanding the ball based on reputation. They build chemistry. They adapt alongside the quarterback. They develop timing together. If you love real talk and fearless NFL breakdowns, hit subscribe and join Coach Speaks. And that kind of environment, it tends to favor a younger signal caller, someone who's learning the system at the same pace, someone who isn't trying to unlearn years of habits from a completely different scheme. It creates alignment. And when everything is aligned, the system, the supporting cast, the timeline, that's when teams start to see real progress. Now add one more layer to this. The Browns have been very deliberate about not locking themselves into a veteran quarterback solution this offseason. There were options available. Conversations were reportedly explored. But when it came time to make a move, they didn't pull the trigger. That hesitation speaks volumes. Because if the plan was to rely fully on experience, they would have secured it by now. They would have brought in a clear veteran presence to stabilize the room and remove uncertainty. But they didn't. Instead, they've kept the door open. Open for competition. Open for development. Open for someone within the current system to step forward and take control. And when you connect all of these dots, the flexible offensive line, the youth movement at receiver, the lack of a veteran addition, the ongoing evaluation at quarterback, it stops looking like a coincidence. It starts looking like preparation. preparation for a different kind of leader under center, a different timeline, a different identity, which brings everything full circle. Because once you understand the direction this team is moving in, it becomes a lot clearer why certain players are being phased out of the conversation, and why others are suddenly becoming central to it. Because in a transition like this, not everyone fits the future that's being built. And the closer the Browns get to fully committing to that new direction, the clearer those decisions are going to become. And when you put all of this together, the silence, the insider comments, the shift in roster strategy, one conclusion starts to feel unavoidable. Dillon Gabriel doesn't fit what the Browns are building anymore. And that's not a knock on his talent. That's the part people get wrong. In the NFL, situations like this aren't always about whether a player is good enough. Sometimes it's about timing. Sometimes it's about alignment. And sometimes it's about a new vision coming in and reshaping everything that existed before it. That's exactly what's happening here. Gabriel was drafted under a different mindset, different leadership, different expectations for how the quarterback room would look. At that time, bringing in a young, developmental arm made sense within the structure they had. But that structure, it's gone. And when a new regime steps in, they don't feel obligated to continue a plan they didn't create. They evaluate everything from scratch. They look at the roster and ask one simple question: does this player fit what we want to do moving forward? Right now, it's starting to look like Gabriel's answer to that question is uncertain at best. Because think about the current setup. You've got a high-stakes competition at the top of the depth chart, a veteran with a massive presence, a younger quarterback rapidly gaining ground and forcing real consideration for the starting role. And on top of that, the front office is actively exploring the idea of bringing in another developmental quarterback through the draft. That's already a crowded room. And in that kind of environment, roles become very clear, very quickly. You either have a defined path, or you become expendable. For Gabriel, the path just isn't there anymore. He's not firmly in the starting conversation. He's not the clear long-term project tied to the new system. And if another young quarterback comes in, someone specifically chosen to fit this updated vision, then Gabriel becomes something teams try to avoid carrying. Redundant. And redundancy in the NFL doesn't last long. Because every roster spot matters. Every position has to serve a purpose. And if a player isn't contributing directly to the current plan, teams don't hesitate to make a move, even if that player was a recent investment. We've seen it happen before. Young players moved early. Draft picks flipped quicker than expected. Not because they failed, but because the direction changed faster than they could adapt to it. That's what this feels like. A situation where Gabriel isn't being pushed out because of one specific mistake, but because everything around him is shifting in a way that no longer includes him. And the fact that the organization is already open to moving him, that just confirms it. Because teams don't start having those conversations unless they've already accepted the possibility of moving forward without that player. Now here's the part that should really get your attention. If the Browns are willing to move on from a recent third-round quarterback this early, it tells you just how serious they are about reshaping this room. It tells you they're not holding onto past decisions just to justify them. They're prioritizing what comes next. And when a team reaches that point, the real changes usually aren't far behind. Because this isn't the end of the story. It's just the final piece falling into place before everything else starts to unfold. And once it does, the spotlight on this quarterback battle is going to get even brighter. And now, everything is set. Not officially, not on paper, but if you've been following the signs, you can feel it building. Because what's happening in Cleveland right now isn't just another off-season storyline. It's not just a routine quarterback battle that gets settled quietly before week 1. This is something bigger, something that's been developing piece by piece, moment by moment, and it's all about to collide. Training camp is where it explodes. That's when the reps become real, That's when every throw gets dissected, every decision gets questioned, and every small edge turns into a major talking point. There's no hiding in that environment, no controlling the narrative. The truth shows up fast, and it shows up on tape. And when it does, someone is going to separate. Because this isn't a situation where the Browns can afford to stay neutral. They've built too much, shifted too much, and invested too much into this transition to walk away without a clear direction. At some point, a decision has to be made, and it's not going to please everyone. That's where the tension comes in. Because if the competition plays out the way it's trending right now, there's a real possibility that the outcome creates more questions than answers. Not about talent, not about effort, but about what the team chooses to do with what they're seeing. If one quarterback clearly gives them the best chance to win, the choice should be simple. But in reality, it rarely is. There are layers to this: expectations, investments, perceptions, all the things that don't show up on the stat sheet but still influence how decisions get made. And when those layers clash with what's happening on the field, that's when things get complicated. That's when stories like this turn into full-blown drama. Because the locker room will notice, the media will notice, the fans will definitely notice. And once the conversation shifts from who's competing to why is this decision being made, there's no going back. That's the storm. And it's coming fast. You can already see the early signs, the quiet shifts, the subtle messaging, the way certain names are rising while others are fading out. It's all leading toward that moment where everything has to be decided under pressure, in real time, with the entire league watching. And right in the center of it all is a quarterback who wasn't supposed to take over this quickly. A situation that wasn't supposed to get this complicated. And a team that now has to figure out whether it's ready to fully embrace what's happening or try to control it. So here's the real question you need to be asking yourself. If one player steps up and proves, without a doubt, that he's the best option, will the Browns actually make the move? Or will other factors step in and slow it down? Because one way or another, this is about to unfold in front of everyone. And when it does, you're going to want to be paying very close attention.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.